Hello everyone. This is a little tutorial about how to create your own BMX Streets mod maps. This process is essentially the same as it used to be for Pipe. Just the Unity side of things has changed and been updated a little bit. So if you know how to do all the stuff around, so the modeling, texturing, whatnot, you can just skip further into the video and I'll go over the Unity stuff there. If you don't, and you're essentially completely new to this stuff, then stick around. I'm not going to be explaining how to model things and texture things. I'm just going to tell you that you need to have stuff modeled. You can look for tutorials on this stuff yourself. There's enough out there. This is just really how to export the stuff and how to put it into Unity and like which format the textures need and whatever. So I have already modeled this thing. I've done it in Blender. You can do it in whatever you like. I prefer Blender also because it's free. And yeah, things you need to take care of when modeling is you are going to want a realistic scale. So these things are, if you look over here, in like realistic dimensions, right? So this is only like 1.26 m high. This quarter pipe is like 2 meters high. That'll be important. You can see that over here. You can always import a reference model for like a reference human from somewhere on the internet. You could use BlenderKit, for example, and just look for human spell and just pull something in. And that'll, like most of the time, these will have a realistic scale. If not, you can scale them down to match the scale here for like a real life average sized human. And then you can model your park to that. That'll be important. Also for rails, so things that would have a bunch of faces all around to grind on, you will want your own colliders. So something that matches the shape of the rail, like this, but is simplified in like in the corner faces. So you see, you just have these here. I have the same thing for this. So this is the rail, and this is the collider. So simplified. This is so that the character doesn't try to do like weird wall rides on it or something. Also a general thing about the topology. You are going to want to make sure when modeling this that you don't use super high poly models, right? So this is, for example, fairly simple. The whole park, as you can see, is fairly simple. So there's no objects where, for example, it looks like this or something. This like face counts like this is what you see in some modeling tutorials, but like for games you generally want to keep it low. And this is totally enough. I've released this park, I've played on it, it works. In fact, it works better if it's performance-wise and also just gameplay-wise, if there's not more faces than are needed to define a shape. Yeah. And yeah, also you're going to want to make sure that your materials are assigned in a way that makes sense. So yeah, for example, I can go into the texture preview here. Everything that has like the floor, that's going to get the floor textures later has that material. I did my textures in Substance Painter, which allowed me to put a lot more like manual detail in, versus when you get your textures just like your tileable, seamless textures from like an online library like Polyhaven or something like that. Which is a totally fine way to do it. I just wanted to put a lot of manual detail in, so I used Substance Painter. Substance Painter also has the advantage that it allows you to export your textures so that it matches the format that the rendering pipeline from Unity wants. Now, let's say that your park is finished in the modeling stage. You've made all of your colliders. You've checked that your textures work with everything. So either if you have them from Substance or from somewhere else that your UVs work. I pulled some of them in Blender here to make sure that they all work correctly. Also for the colliders, what I've done so that I can identify them easily is I've put them all in a collection here and I've named them something that makes sense. Everything else I really didn't bother much with naming, so you can see here it's just something, because I can find it all in viewport pretty easily. If you have a bigger map, you might want to organize this, but it's not too important. There's nothing that you have to do for it to work in Unity. So, you will want to select everything. Make sure that you don't have like cameras or lights in here. It's not going to be the end of the world if you do, but it'll make it easier to use in Unity if you just have your geometry objects in here. You are going to want to go to File, Export, and then FBX. Now, select the location where you've saved your Blender file, and to make sure, just choose selected objects over here. This makes it so that, well, you only export what you have selected, and it makes sure that you don't have anything that you don't really want in there coming along with this model. Just give it a name that makes sense, put it to a location where you're going to find it, and press export. Now, for the Unity side of things, you are going to want to get and open Unity Hub in the latest version. You're going to have to make an account for Unity, I believe, and log in with that. You can then go over here to Installs, select Install Editor, and go to Archive. This is because we need a specific old version of Unity that Streets uses. So you're going to want to go to visit our download archive, and then you can pull up the correct version. It is Unity 2022.3.8. There you go. And then you can say download via Unity Hub. It's going to prompt you to open it with that, and then it should start the download in here. Just finish that, and then you'll have it installed. After this, you can go over to Projects and select New Project. Then up here you can select the version that you'll want. This is the pipe version, but you're going to want to select this one. And then this is really important. You will have to select this preset, High Definition 3D. This is the rendering pipeline, the HDRP that Unity has and Streets uses, and if you don't choose this, it's going to cause a whole lot of problems with your lights not working properly and maybe your shaders not showing up. So just choose this right here and you should be good to go. Put it on a location where you're going to find it that suits you, and then just go for Create Project. This is going to take a little while, might be several minutes, but that's fine. Just let it run, and yeah. Now, once that our Unity project has been created, we should be greeted with something like this. This is an overview that tells us that all the settings for the HDRP, the rendering pipeline, have been made correctly, which is because we selected it right in the start. Now, the first thing that you're going to want to do is delete this camera over here. Streets comes with its own camera, and if you keep this one in here, there's going to be conflicts. So to import our model, I would go ahead and create a little bit of a folder structure here in the under assets in the project window. This is so that you can see through this stuff a little bit better. If you import multiple textures for different materials and then multiple materials, you will want to have folders for that so that you can see through it. You can then come over here and find the model that you exported and just pull it in here. Unity will import that. Then sometimes if your model is a bit bigger, there will, like, a window will pop up here and it'll do a little import process. This should take at maximum a few minutes and then it'll be done. You can then go ahead and just pull this in here. It'll spawn it at 000, and voila, there's your park from Blender. Also in a scale that makes sense, because we looked after that in Blender. And yeah, so we can work now on making this work properly for the game. This essentially, first and foremost, entails making sure that you can actually write on this. that means that you are going to want to come in here and select everything that you want to be a writable surface with collision and give it a collider. As you can see, if I click on any one of these things here, this does not have a collider component. It's just a mesh renderer so that you can see it. You are going to want to come over here and click on add component and then say mesh, and then there'll be a mesh collider. Now if we disable this mesh renderer, you can see in green here, this is the collider that it's generated. It uses just the faces that you've modeled in Blender, but triangulated. This is also a reason why you don't want to have super high poly geo, else it'll have to use all those faces for collisions. Now to do this more quickly, you can just come in here and select all of these and go add component mesh collider. Now if you go in here and you select essentially any one of these, they're all going to have the mesh collider. Downside of this is that something like this tree here also has the mesh collider now, and as you can see, that's not optimal. Especially because nobody's ever supposed to collide with the leaves up there. So this is one of these cases similar with the rails where I added a specific collider that I don't want to render even, so I can just untick the mesh renderer and only use the collider. You see over here I called it tree 01 collider. I have the same setup for these two trees and for these rails as well. And then I can just come over here to this tree and remove the mesh collider. You can remove these entirely by going over here and just say remove component. There you go. So now this tree is essentially optimized in that way. You're going to want to go through this and do that for everything. And just give it some thought, like what would make sense to have it writable and what would make sense to make sure that it doesn't have a collider. And yeah, I will just now, I would go through and do this. This is also just a collider, as you can see over here. This is a simplified shape of this rail. So I'm gonna remove the renderer because we don't want to see it, keep the collider, and then just select the rail, but remove the collider and keep the renderer. So there you go. You're gonna want to go through this whole thing, do that for everything, and that's the collider part. Now, to make sure that your player can actually spawn on this map, you're going to want to come over here and say create empty and name it spawn point. So exactly like this. The game will recognize this and use it as a spawn point for a character, and then wherever you place this is where they're going to spawn. I put it up here, and I believe the way that this the blue arrow, so the z-axis is facing, is going to be where your player will face to. So yeah, I always made sure to lift it a little bit above the surface that it's supposed to be standing on, just so that there's no like issues with clipping through the ground. By now the map is essentially ready to be exported and played in Streets using a custom script for the export. I'm going to show that in a bit and also put it in the description. Further things that you might want to be taking care of after this very bare bones initial step of just making it playable is done are things like the lighting, where you could change the color temperature and like the intensity and the softness of the shadows and things like that, and of course the textures and materials. I'm just going to show this step first for all the people that just want to know how the importing works with the script, and then for everybody that already knows how to do the details, they can sign off there. And if you want to know how to put the textures in and make materials out of them, I'll show that after. Now for the custom script, we're going to want to go in here and in the assets folder create a new folder called editor. In there we're going to want to create a new C# script called CreateAssetBundles. Open that up, just select everything here and replace it with the script. Hit save, you can close that right up. Unity will import the thing, compile it, and then what you'll want to do is find the scene that you're currently in. Since I've used the default scene here, you can see up here it's called outdoor scene. It's just straight under assets right here. You will want to select that, and down here under Asset Bundle, you can click on that, say New. We can call it Custom Map. Really just call it whatever you want. And once you've done that, just hit right click and say Build Asset Bundles. Now, once this is done, you are going to have a new folder created in your project here called Asset Bundles. You can double click that, and then you'll find your file like you named the Asset Bundle tag. You can right click it, say Show and Explore. It'll open up here. As you can see, it's just 2 megabytes. And then you'll want to pull that, like you would just import other mod maps, into your BMX Streets folder under Documents, and then Maps, and then you can just copy the whole thing, paste it, and now it'll be in game. We have it over here, Custom Map, and we're spawned, and we can walk and write stuff. So yeah, that works. As you can see, the lighting is not quite there. Also, the shadows are really blurry. This is all stuff that I'm going to show now. But if you know how to do all that stuff, then now you know how to set up the thing in Unity and import it to Streets, not Pipe. This is Streets. Okay, now that the map is playable already, we can work on making it more pretty. One thing that we saw in game that would need fixing there is the light, definitely. The shadows were very blurry and blobby. This is because of the resolution. If your map, you know, isn't too huge and hasn't too much like fine geometry details, I would recommend setting the shadow resolution to the highest thing possible. I mean, you can always just set it to the highest and then test if, you know, it performs well. Because of course, the higher this resolution is, the more performance it'll cost, and then you can maybe pull the softness down a little bit to get some, you know, crisper shadows, something like that. And then you can really just play around with these things, mainly stuff over here, and also the light angle. You could do something like this and then bring down the light temperature to make it something like a sundown vibe, something like that. The conversion from how it looks in editor to how it looks in the game is a bit intransparent. I don't think the mapping community has figured out entirely what's going on there and how to get it looking as close to how it is in editor as possible in game. At least I don't exactly know how to really do that. I had to do a bunch of trial and error when I made this map. You can also add other lights if you wanted to. In my case, I started out with the sunlight and the actual version of this map that I made, and as you can see, the shadows here are quite dark, but it seems fine. But when I exported to the game and played it, it was really dark in the shadows, so I just added an area light coming from this side. You can do that, just add more lights, put them to real time, and then they should work properly. I don't think you can do this with infinitely many lights if they're set to real time, but try to keep it, you know, try to get the most out of each light, and then you shouldn't need that many. As for the materials, what we're going to want to do is, under assets, like we did with models, make 2 folders. I would call them textures and materials. You can sort this differently. I like to do it like this. It's a bit separated, and yeah. So you can now just, as I said, do it how you want. Make folders for separate materials if you have a lot of them. Do it however. Now I have 2 texture set variants here, one from Polyhaven and one is the one that I made myself in Substance Painter. You're going to want to pull these in. We'll do the Substance Painter one first, and then in the materials folder go to Create and select material. This should, or not, usually this works. There you go. I'll just call this one floor. Doesn't really matter how you call it, just so that you can understand it. This will make an HDRP shader that the game knows how to use. And here you have your slots for your texture maps. Now we can click on this, and here are the maps that I just imported. So if we select floor, you'll see down here, it uses that now. Now this slot here, the mask map, is what I meant earlier. Unity doesn't, like Blender or other rendering engines that you know from like CGI, like offline rendering, that's not real time. I mean, Unity doesn't use a separate roughness and a separate metallic map. Unity, similar to Unreal Engine, uses one map that combines these maps just so to save disk space and optimize for games. So for Unity, this is called a mask map, and it uses the different channels of RGB for like metallic roughness and stuff like that. I believe actually the mask map uses the alpha, or you can change what it uses. Substance Painter exports this in a way that you can just use it, and it looks in Unity like it did in Substance Painter. And as I said, if you use textures from another source where they come as roughness and metallic, you will have to find a way to convert this. You can Google how these mask maps work and then just put it together. But in my case, I have a mask map. I can just select this, and then for normal map, I can also select this. For the normal map, it's important to actually tell the engine that this is a normal map, because the color space will work a bit differently. Just select that, hit apply, and then it works. Now we have our finished material, and to make sure that on every new import of this map, the floor knows to use our floor material. You can see over here, these are all the materials that came from Blender, and this is where the material assignments are important, because now everything that has floor assigned, we can say we want to override it with a material of our own, which is our floor, and then we select that, hit apply, and then there it is. And as you can see, it uses the roughness texture, it uses the normal map. You have some bumps in here. Another important thing is for textures that have a bit of a higher resolution, I exported these in 4K. You're going to want to go in and manually, the default here for Unity is 2K. Just set 4K, hit apply, and especially for the normal map, you're going to hopefully see this difference. It's a bit more pixelated if you set apply now. There you go, you have more detail in there. This is important if your textures are 4K. I would recommend not making every single texture 4K, just the ones that really need it. So since this floor is quite large, and I used just one material and one texture for the whole thing, I wanted to make sure that all the details are preserved, so I went with 4K. But most of the ramps are less than that. Now, if we want to have a material from Polyhaven or just textures from somewhere else, this will be very similar. I'm just going to call this floor alternative version, and we're going to go to textures, import these ones, and there we go, they've arrived proper. And then, like we just did it, we can select this, and as I said, the mask map here isn't really there. This is just a roughness map. Metallic materials will have a metalness map as well, but you'll need to combine them. For the normal map, we'll do normal, apply. Now our alternative floor is done, and we can head over to models and change the override there just to see what that looks like. There you go. You can see that the scale for this one is way off. You could do this either by pulling the texture into Blender and then adjusting the UVs of the faces that uses this material, or you could just go in the material here in Unity and then and then change the tiling here. So tiling is essentially just how much the textures will be repeated. This is, however, now applied to not just these faces, but all the objects that use this exact material. So if, I don't know, if you also gave it to this object, but the UVs are entirely different in scale to how they are on the floor, it might be these squares here, these tiles might be way smaller on this ramp, so you'd either want to adjust the UVs to match the scale of this, or just make a copy of this material and tile it differently if you want the tiles on here to match on the floor, if you wanted it on both of them. But yeah, that's that's a way you could do that. And there you go. That's basically everything you need. Now you can just model more detailed models, make more materials, get more textures, either make them yourself or download them. Put them into new materials, apply them, and then just add more detail all around and add more like gameplay features, make the park larger, more detailed, whatever you like. Yeah, that should be what you need to get started with this. It'll take some time to get faster and get used to doing the modeling stuff, and also if you want to look into texturing, that too. But it's definitely worth it. It's a lot of fun. It's really cool to be able to write your own creations, and I hope this helps you.